So I was hit by an engine and gearbox complete. Took me right leg off and completely dislocated my left leg. That's why I wanted to be a Royal Marine. I think if you used to look back, that came from believing that you were a coward and dreaming of not being a coward. And for me, the epitome of someone who was big, strong and able to defend their mum, I suppose. All of us have this well of potential that we just don't use. Don't even know it's there. We don't believe it's there.
Yeah.
We don't believe it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lights, Camera, Combat podcast. The podcast where we talk to incredible people with inspirational stories from a life in connection to combat and shine a light on it. Over the course of this series, I'll be sitting down with veterans turned TV presenters, incredible athletes, world record holders and even World War II veterans to help me and hopefully you find the light at the end of any tunnel. On today's episode, I will be sitting down for part one of a conversation with four-time world record holder Lee Spencer. In this episode, Lee will take us from traumatic childhood to serving covert operations in Afghanistan, right up to the night that changed his life. Some of the most incredible and eye-opening conversations I've ever had and you probably may ever hear. Lee has the most inspirational outlook on life, and through the adversity that he has faced as a child all the way up to today is quite simply unbelievable. There's so much more to come from this story in the next episode, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But for now, wherever you are, however you listen, sit back and enjoy this episode of Lights, Camera, Combat. Royal Marine veteran, four-time world record holder and motivational speaker, Lee Spencer, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming in, mate. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for asking.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. This is one of the episodes I've been most excited about getting sorted, so it's awesome to sit down with you. First and foremost, how are you doing at the moment?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yep.
Awesome. So it's such an awesome journey, this story that we'll go across today. But I want to start right at the very beginning. As I do with everyone, take it back to sort of the earliest memories that you've got and sort of the experiences that shaped you into becoming a soldier and where you kind of first discovered that path.
Well, actually, the earliest memory is quite a recent one, in a bizarre way. Let me explain. It probably sounds like nonsense. What made me want to be a Royal Marine? Because it was something I always wanted to be from my earliest memory. And that, I suppose I grew up in quite difficult circumstances. It was a household dominated by alcoholism and violence. My dad was a violent alcoholic and he used to beat my mum up quite badly. And my mum used to cry for me to come and help her. And I would come running in as a tot and freeze with fear, in the doorway. So I was petrified of my dad. He beat me up at least once as well. And I say a recent memory because all of those memories, I knew it happened. It was a matter of fact that that's what my dad used to do. Like, my mum always had black eyes. I can remember being in a doctor's when I was about, excuse me, maybe 5 or 6, with concussion and being off school with concussion for a couple of weeks. And it was talked about openly, it was a big part of our early life as a family. But I can't remember the actual instances. They were all locked away. And I know they were. I can remember the immediate before and I can remember the immediate afterwards. And so I knew they were in there somewhere and I was quite happy not to dabble in there. And about 9 months ago, so might be low, spring last year, just randomly driving back from my son's house with my wife, just driving in my van, and a memory of my dad beating my mum up just popped into my head. But it popped into my head as if it had always been there. which is really strange. But it had the memory had a freshness to it in details that you wouldn't have over that time distance. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And as I said to my wife, I said, "You'll never guess what." I told her. She went, "Wow, you feel alright?" I went, "Yeah, I think so." I then rang my sister and told her about it, and I could remember quite a lot of detail. And I think she can remember the actual incident as well. My sister's a couple of years younger than me, and it changed not only the way that I thought about my mum, changed about the way I thought about my dad as well, as obviously it would. Because I knew that he was a wife beater, I knew that he was a violent alcoholic. Because I can't remember the actual instances, I don't think I had an emotional attachment to that knowledge.
Yeah.
But after that memory popped into my head, that changed everything. And it affected me, I think, on a personal level. I didn't really change the way I think or anything like that, but I'm normally quite good at doing about 3 or 4 things at the same time, spinning lots of plates. For about 6 months, I just lost the ability to be able to focus on 2 or 3 things. I noticed that I had, so I know that it affected me. I think it's too much of a coincidence for that to have happened straight as directly after that memory popping into my head. So that's that is now my earliest and first memory. How it shaped me into being a Royal Marine, I think I always believed I was a coward. Like later on in the Marines, I had a fantastic time. But there was always that it was actually a voice in my head that would say, if you was on exercise or, on a course or something, and say, well, that's okay doing it now, but you're not going to be able to do this. When people start shooting back at you, you're not going to be able to do it because you're a coward. And it was matter of fact, I didn't question it. I just, I believed that I was just masquerading as a Royal Marine. And that comes from, I suppose, being that kid, believing you're a coward. I dreamed of not being a coward. I dreamed of being someone brave.
Do you know where that stemmed from? That sort of as a child?
Yeah, but I sat there frozen with fear when your mum's screaming for you to help and you just can't.
Yeah.
I was petrified of my dad. That leaves you with a deep psychological scar, like a canyon through your psychology, where you believe absolutely to the core of your being that you're a coward because you can't protect your mum. She was screaming for me to help her. She used to do that all the time.
So how many, you mentioned your sister, was it just the two of you?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel like you had to grow up a lot quicker in terms of protection of your sister, or not?
No, I don't think so, no. See, it all changed. When my mum and dad, my mum left him when I was about 7. And then he stopped being a wife beater. He was still an alcoholic, he seems to get drunk. And my sister and my dad had no relationship, which I always struggled to understand. But now I have that memory, I completely understand how she feels, Because I didn't have that memory, I had no memory of him. I knew he kind of did it, but it was like I read about it in a book. I thought, that's what he was like. And I remember my dad's sister used to say, "Lee, he's got a disease. It's like you may as well get annoyed at someone for sneezing because they got a cold. Your dad's an alcoholic." And I used to think, oh yeah, but actually no, because I actually know loads of alcoholics. Probably we all know someone who's an alcoholic, probably, but it doesn't make them violent. Doesn't make them a wife beater. So it doesn't cover it. But when my dad left and he stopped being that wife beater, and because I didn't have that emotional attachment to what he'd done, because I had no memory of it, I knew it happened. I had knowledge, but no memory. That and my relationship with my mum, deteriorated, disintegrated. It's probably the better way of putting it.
Why is that?
Don't know. I've thought about it again and again, and it's probably not one reason, but even the lots of different reasons. Like, she might have seen my dad in me. She once told me that she was scared that I would, because we used to argue and argue and argue. It was almost like the best description is, it was like she hated me, and that was from the moment, from about 7-8 years of age. You know, I obviously had deep psychological traumas. My hair fell out with nervous anaesthesia. I used to have reoccurring nightmares. My mum sort of got another partner, and I remember she told me this, that I went to a child psychiatrist, because obviously everything that was happening, and he said to my mum that my mum's husband, he ended up her husband, he'll never be good for your son, so what are you going to do? Or words to that effect. Now, that, when you look back at it, that, you know, for a psychiatrist or a psychologist or something, I don't think they actually say to people, you should do this or you should do that. They let you explore. I think that's the way it works. But for him to be that definite, and she didn't, and I think she blamed herself for that. So I don't know if it was guilt that made her do it, or my dad, because my dad and my sister's relationship just was nothing. I don't know if she definitely overcompensated for that with more affection from my sister than. But
So your relationship with your dad was a normal father-son relationship after that point?
Yeah, well, as normal as it can be with an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. In fact, I sort of hero worshipped him.
Do you think that could have fed into the relationship with your mum?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely, yeah. But none of those things I've mentioned, even together, is enough to describe how bad the relationship disintegrated. Like, I felt she hated me, and that's how she acted. And to give it context, my mum's youngest sister, and her mum's one of three girls. Her youngest sister, my Aunt Vicky, she always used to say to me as a kid, you know your mum loves you really, Lee. And I've never thought about it. It was, oh yeah. But it's that really. Because she could see us, and I asked her, about 2 years ago, when, you know, I said, you know, you used to say, you know your mum loves you really. She said, yeah. I said, was that because you could see how she was with me? She went, yeah. So it weren't just me, you know, it was, you know, it was how it was.
And we'll touch on your mum a little bit later in different parts of the story, sort of the more present stuff. But did that relationship ever improve, or was that the way it was?
Yeah, so it was at times horrific. Like, couldn't be in the same room with her. She used to come down and stay. So I joined the Marines, moved to Devon, and my mum used to come down and stay. My dad used to come down and stay as well. And whenever my mum, in fact, whenever either of them would come down, I'd be dread in the pit of my stomach. My dad, because I knew he'd turn up absolutely paralytic. We'll have an argument. He'd go into whatever one of the kids' rooms he was staying in for 24 hours, saying he's got chicken flu, and eventually dried out, and then he'd be fine. He'd be fine sometimes for 6-7 weeks, wouldn't drink, and he'd be like perfect, you know. He was just really nice to be around. He was fun, and my kids loved him, absolutely loved him. All of my cousins, I'm the eldest of about 12, 14, I can't remember how many cousins I got, but they all loved my dad because he was funny, he used to make them laugh, he was just a really nice bloke. Which is odd saying that about,
Yeah, of course.
but you know, it is what it is. And my mum, when I was about mid-30s, I think, she started taking antidepressants and changed overnight. She's completely changed and became the mother she should have been. By then, I could not stand any form of intimacy, any form of contact, physical contact with my mum. If she touched me, I'd flinch. It was uncontrollable.
Really?
Yeah. And I'd flinch, and she hated it, obviously. But she knew where it come from. She understood. And I used to try my hardest to control it because I knew how much it upset her, but it was so deeply ingrained within me when she touched me. I remember like going to Essex and just visit and saying goodbye to my aunt and giving her a hug, and then like saying goodbye to my mum. She said, "How am I going to get a hug?" And I was like, never hugged me mum.
Yeah.
And I was an adult by then. It was just odd. I was like, no, I can't. I don't want to.
Which is a very unique relationship to have with your mum.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, not ideal,
No.
is it? No.
So, back at this point, you've got this sort of fractious relationship anyway from childhood. When did the Royal Marines pop into your head as the goal?
Can't remember. It was always there.
Yeah.
My dad used to drink on a table in the British Legion, and they used to call it the Royal Marines mess deck. It was about 5 or 6 old Marines from the war, and they would tell stories and laugh and joke. None of them about fighting, even though they all went through the war. One of them wasn't a commando. He joined in about 1936 before the commandos were formed, and he stayed a kind of ship's marine going through, and he was the funniest of the lot. And all their stories were always about getting drunk and fighting in bars and not actually fighting the Germans or the Japanese. So they had an effect on me because they were different. And I could see that they had a camaraderie that other, my granddad used to run the British Legion, so I sort of grew up there.
Okay.
If I wanted to see my dad, I never went to his flat, which was over the road I grew up in Dagenham. I'd just walk right past his flat to the British Legion because that's where we'd be.
Yeah. And did he have a military connection himself, or was it just he would be there because your granddad?
No.
Or just he literally enjoyed being there?
Yeah, just being there. And I don't know why he drunk with all the Marines. I don't know. He was the only one who really used to sit down and drink with them. But I think that maybe informed that it was a dream, actually, because that's why I wanted to be a Royal Marine. I think if you used to look back, that came from believing that you were a coward and dreaming of not being a coward. And for me, the epitome of someone who was big, strong and able to defend their mum, I suppose, was a Royal Marine, although I didn't think of it in those terms. I just wanted to be that person. I was never in the cadets, or I wasn't massively into the military no more than anyone else. I didn't want to be a soldier. I wanted to be a Royal Marine.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that's also on my mum's side of the family. My mum's maternal granddad, so my great granddad, he used to they had a son called Jackie. He got I think he was in Palestine, and he was in a troop transport ship going to Africa that was torpedoed, sunk, and they lost him. And they always spoke about Uncle Jackie growing up. In fact, he fell in love and got engaged with a Jewish girl in Palestine. and she always stayed part. She never remarried and always stayed part of our family. Like, they must have made contact after the war.
Yeah.
She must have made contact with, like, Jackie's family. And we always had our Billa in Israel. And when my sister went out to Israel in the kibbutz and spent time living with her. Yeah, really bizarre. Yeah, she came and stayed with us. Yeah, Aunt Billa in Israel. Yeah, but anyway, how would I digress? But my great granddad, so my mum's dad, he would always say, like, he'd sit me on his knee apparently and say to me, Mum, oh, one day you'll have a soldier and he'll look after you. He'll grow up and be a soldier. So I don't. So there was that kind of from that side of the family. There was that kind of sense of wanting to be a soldier. And on my dad's side of the family, my granddad, my dad's dad, he was mayor of Dagenham. He was quite a big, imposing figure, and he ran the local British Legion. He was a stoker in the North Atlantic convoys. I think apparently he was sunk a couple of times. But his whole personality, everything revolved around his service in the war. So I was always surrounded by World War II veterans, and it was always part of, that war generation was always an integral part of me growing up. So there was that element to wanting to be a Royal Marine as well, although there were no Royal Marines in my family.
There's a sort of a theme that runs through part of the story of failure and difficulties and overcoming certain things. And I've heard you speak before about encountering a careers fair, a Royal Marine careers fair.
No, it was at school when you take your options.
Your options.
So third year at school, when you take your options, I went straight up to the Royal Marine and said, I want to join the Royal Marines. And he said, are you in the football team? I wasn't. He said, are you captain of the football team? I said, no. He said, you're in the football team? I said, no. And he said, you're not what we're looking for. Literally like that. And I remember he had like a big pile of Royal Marine brochures. And I was like, hey, can I have one of them? And he says, no, I haven't really got enough. And there was a massive big pile. I remember thinking, really? And then that's not the only time. When I left school, I started working. And not a million miles away from here. We're in Holborn at the moment. And I worked in London, a job I hated. And then I thought, right, that's the thing about a dream. And then any aspiration I had for being a Royal Marine was dashed against the rock. If a Royal Marine sergeant who's part of a recruiting team says, you're not what we're looking for, I believed it.
Yeah.
But then that's the thing about dreams. If you keep dreaming, they kind of hook into you.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, I'm going to try and join the Marines. This was about 19. And I went to the careers office. It used to be literally round the corner here in Holborn. And I was interviewed by Chief Petty Officer Smith from the Royal Navy. And at the end of the interview, he said, you're not what we're looking for, those same words.
Was there reasons why that he gave you that?
Yeah, because physically I was absolutely bang average. I wasn't in the football team, but I played football every break time.
Yeah.
I remember because I wasn't a sprinter. I wasn't good at sprinting. When you were a kid, you kind of think, well, I must be good at long cross country, long distance. And we had the trials. I think it was about the same time, about the third year. Basically, they sent the whole year off round running around this course, and I wanted to get into the cross country team. And as they came back in, they handed you like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So gave you your position. Mine was 53. I tried, and it was only 94. But it was 53 out of 94 in my year. Yeah, I actually tried. I wasn't academic at all. I was told I was thick. Told I wouldn't even get a CSC in maths. Didn't even put me in for it. said it would be a waste of the taxpayers' money, quote.
Wow.
And I wasn't even one of the tough kids. You know, you see so many, it's almost a cliche, isn't it, where, you know, someone who joined the military says, oh, I joined the military, I would have been in prison.
Yeah.
I wasn't even one of them naughty kids either, you know. I was just nothing.
As someone then who's done the amount of service within the Royal Marines that you have, to take it from that guy who said to you with his stool when you're in school, you don't fit the bill. What do you think of the guy saying those things to you now from what you've been through, knowing that evidently that isn't the type of caliber that you have to be to make it in? Do you think that?
No, there's a deeper issue, isn't the right word. There's a deeper meaning to this, right? And it comes down to, right, I broke the world record for rowing across the Atlantic solo by 36 days. I've done that with one leg.
Yeah.
I've led Royal Marines in war. I worked in what we call a covert profile, undercover in Afghanistan. But whenever I say this, my stop phrase is, I am bang average, right? And people say, oh, you're not, you say you're bang average. I say, but I am. But here's the point, right? That's it. I am no different to anyone else. All of us, and this sounds like really a bit like airy fairy, or if you believe, then you can do anything. But we all have this well of potential in us that, you know, if you say to someone that you say that, but he couldn't do that. Yes, they bloody well could. And to turn around to someone and say, he had every right from his understanding to say, you're not what we're looking for. And so did Chief Petty Officer Smith, you're not what we're looking for. When I eventually got past the interview stage a couple of years later and went down on a potential, it's called a PRC then, I think it's called a PRMC now, Potential Royal Marine School. So go down to Lympstone at the Commando Training Centre. It's a 3-night, 4-day course that you have to pass. The night before I went down there, my uncle and aunt came round, my mum's elder sister this time. And my uncle said, I was obviously quite excited, telling him I had a train ticket, a rail warrant for a station called Lympstone Commando. I was so excited. And he said, you'll not pass, they'll not have you. You will be able to stick to discipline, and even if you could, they won't be interested in you. But he was only articulating what everybody else thought. And it isn't, you can't just say, well, that one person was wrong, or my uncle. How dare him say that? It's how we all think. And when people say, you know, when I say to them, I'm bang average, and they say, well, you're not really. Well, they're thinking in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
I'm still that person. I'm still that 13-year-old. I'm still absolutely rubbish physically at sporty things, despite. True story, this is absolutely true. I played Sunday League football. I love football. It's, you know, I'm an Arsenal fan and it's my game, right?
Yeah.
Play Sunday League football from about the age of 16 up to about 4 years. As a centre forward, I scored 2 goals, half a goal a season, right? True story.
Yeah.
I then moved to Devon, and after I joined the Marines, and I started playing the next village on. They had a football team. It was called Buckland Monacorum, and I played for them. But they put me in defence, and I was saying to the manager, I don't know what I'm doing. At least up the front, I'm not going to give away any goals. And we lost a game. It was 17-0. And the next week, he put me sub, And I thought, right, I can play for a team that loses 17-0. I can't be sub. I've got my pride. So that was it. I hung up my football boots. Life happened, lost my leg, and the village where I live, still live, they've got a massive football team. It's a massive football village. And they started up an over 50s walking football team. And I went down there, and in the first game I scored an hat-trick. I score most weekends. I would train on a Sunday. And so that makes me the only person ever, I reckon, to actually improve at football by losing their leg. But everything I've just told you is 100% true.
Yeah.
I've not embellished it in any way. But that gives you an idea, a sense of how unsporty I am.
Yeah. And so that... What was different then about, obviously you're in the same physical condition from when you've been told no twice to then passing? What was that moment?
I went down, I got past the interview stage, went down a potential recruits course, and I kept throwing up, and I've really struggled. I remember you had first thing you done was called the USMC test, so United States Marine Corps test. So it's press ups, how as most you can do in 2 minutes, but once your knees come away and you're in the press up position, as soon as your knees touch the ground, that's it, clock stops. As many as you can. I think 60 at 4 points, and there was sit ups in 2 minutes, burpees in 2 minutes, sprints and pull ups. And I'd been practicing. I remember the first time, like, when they said you got down and the person in front of you was counting, he put his fist underneath your chest. You got in the press up position, so your hands either side of his fist. And they went, like, knees away. So you put your knees away, so you're in that plank position. And they were like, go. And I went down, and you had to go all the way down so your chest touched his fist. And I went down and back up again. And I thought, oh, bugger, I'm going to struggle here, because I hadn't been doing that. I'd been doing what I thought were press-ups, and I obviously wasn't. And so anyway, I scraped through everything, kept throwing up. And then the last thing they do is you go around the assault course, right? And you just keep going round it. What I didn't know is what they do on the potential recruits course, or what they did. I don't know if they still do it. They get you going round the assault course, round and round and round, until people start dropping out. And a curious thing happened, right? The sergeant major of the course, he came down and he followed me. In hindsight, I now know the way they would all sit down and go, right, he's failed, he's borderline, this one is really borderline. And the sergeant major's gone, okay, I'll come down and have a look at him. That's what he'd done. Well, I didn't know that at the time. Yeah. He was just following me. And we was going round, and I was struggling. I hated it. I kept throwing up. I threw up in the swim test as well. So the swimming pool, I was like, ugh, sick of my head. All right, stop. And he went, get outside. And then shower myself down and then get in and do it. And as we was going round, curious thing happened. The longer it went on, I started overtaking people. And when I overtook the first person, I was like, that's the first time I'd ever done anything like that, ever in my life. And then I saw the next person in front of me, and I made them my target, and I caught them up, went past that person, and then I kept doing it. And I finally, I could draw, but I wasn't really good. I never aspired to go into art college and doing anything like that, because I wasn't that good. I wasn't good at anything. And that was the first time in my life, I was 20 or 21, when I finally found something that I was good at, and that was not giving in and catching people. And it's when you get to that CV fitness, rubbish at it. Long distance running, rubbish at it. Yeah. But that, when it's just hard and gnarly and you just have to keep going, that kind of endurance, we all have, actually. But I think because of that first person I passed, it clicked.
Yeah.
And in my head, I thought, right, I finally found something I'm good at. And when I, at the end of the course, a third of us passed. They called out the names of those who third they'd done in reverse order, so those never come back. And then it was like, come back in a year, come back in 6 months, come back in 3 months, and everyone else had passed. And I was like, that bloody hell, I passed. And then they called out about 3 or 4 names, says, right, you've got to go and see the Sergeant Major. So I went in to see the Sergeant Major, knocked at the door, and he said, you've literally just scraped this. I was like, yeah, I know. And he called out me times, and I said, and I done better on the run.
Yeah.
By about 10, 15 seconds. I went, no, I got this. And he went, looked down, he went, oh yeah, but it's still not great. And he said, look, you need to improve on this, and this. I went, yeah. And he went, right, go and send the next bloke out. And I walked out, and just before I got to the door, he went, Spencer. And I turned around and I went, yes, sir. And he went, you're going to be a fucking good Marine. And I went, I walked out there with a massive head. And I always thought afterwards, I wonder if he said that just to give me that little bit of confidence. And I ended up years later on guard on the main gate at Livingston on duty. And he'd since left the Marines, and he'd got a job as a security guard on the canning. I'd just chop up his pension. He was happy as Larry. And I was on the gate with him one night, and I went, you might not remember this. And I told him the story. He went, I can absolutely remember it. And he said, I can remember you. And I absolutely meant it. And I thought, is he telling the truth?
So the training period then, obviously other than finding some of it quite physically gruelling, was there any of it that you enjoyed?
No, none of it. Right, when I first started training, there was 38 of us joined 635 troop, and I looked round, done the maths, I knew about a third would get through, and I was firmly in the bottom third. And from that point, my mission was just to get to Friday still a Royal Marines recruit.
Yeah.
So I really, really struggled in the start of training. I felt like I was clinging on by my fingernails, and you'd get comments like, oh, Spencer, you still here? I thought you'd have given him, those sort of comments. And it all changed. And I say, looking back, my life fundamentally changed on one exercise. It was called Running Man, and it was half survival exercise, half navigation exercise. So they basically take all your food and all your equipment and your sleeping bags off you and everything. And you build a shelter and sit around a fire and starve. And the other part of it is, whilst you're doing that, you then go off and do navigation exercises. And there was a point where I thought, I can't do this anymore. Like in a matter of fact way, I felt that I'd got to the point where I physically couldn't carry on. And I thought, I ain't going to be able to do the next NavX. And I genuinely thought, this is where training finishes for me. I gave it a good shot. And that navigation exercise came in, off I went. And when I came back in and sat around the fire, I was absolutely astonished, honestly astonished that I'd got round. But I was doubly sure I wouldn't be able to do the next one. Guess what came round? The third time that happened, sat around that fire, I didn't have an epiphany. It wasn't like that. It was more of an acknowledgement of, oh, I thought I knew what I was capable of. I clearly don't. And it wasn't like it weren't like, I now know I can do anything. It wasn't like that. It genuinely was just, I thought I knew what I was capable of, but I don't. And that, in that very small way, it weren't a massive dramatic moment.
Yeah.
But in that small way, I sort of got a confidence. And from that point on, I began to flourish in training. There was a couple of other things as well. There was you got the Sergeant Major of the potential recruits course. He said, you'll be a fucking good Marine. Corporal took me through training. He was absolutely bonkers. I think he got blown up on Man Harriet in the Falklands, and he also got shot in the shoulder in Ireland. So in hindsight, he obviously had a few issues. But I could joke with him and take the mickey out of him like no one else in the troop could. And if I ever messed anything up, he would thrash me, punch me. Yeah.
Wow.
He used to do a thing, and it was an odd thing, because he'd say, right, he'd go, Spencer, Kevin the fruit bat, and I'd have to hang from a bar in, like, you got these weapon training stances, and I'd hang there, and he'd line the section up, and they'd have to punch me in the stomach, and they'd all be going, oh, faking it, and I'd be going, oh, and it became a bit of a joke. And at the back, he'd be like waiting his turn, doing this, and he'd punch me a couple of times properly. And I remember once on like, it was a really odd thing. Then once on the GPMG, general purpose machine gun, like when we was learning it, if I got one of the drills wrong, he would physically boot me, and he was absolutely angry, like he wasn't with anyone else. He wouldn't treat anyone else like that, but I was his undoubted favourite, which sounds odd, but to the point where he saw something in me that no one else did. The other corporals, you know, you got to look at, it's my perception, it might not be true, but I absolutely got the feeling that they thought I was a bit of a weakling, a bit weak, lacked aggression, and whereas he didn't. So and I can pinpoint about 4 or 5 people in my military career that saw something in me and gave me that chance.
Yeah.
But that, so what I'm saying is basically that moment when I realised I didn't know what I was capable of, that changed how I saw myself in training. I didn't see myself by clinging on by my fingernails anymore. It was more a case of, oh, I didn't think I'd be able to do that, and I could, so maybe I'll be able to do this.
Yeah.
And it changed the way I approached everything, and I gained more confidence, and I actually flourished.
Yeah.
I was one of the stronger members of the troop when the 11 of us passed out, 11 originals, and I was one of the stronger ones of those 11, and I started as one of the weakest ones of the 38.
Yeah.
But that was that change. But it also needed that person who saw something in me to give me that chance. Like the colour sergeant, when I went back to the careers office, I was interviewed at 20 when I thought, right, that's it, I'm going to give the Royal Marines one more go. And finally got in.
Yeah.
Got that colour sergeant there. You got the sergeant major with the PRC course. You got Corporal Lynch, who took me through training. He saw something in me.
It's something we'll touch on a little bit later, but that feeling and that realisation, do you think that's something that everybody has in them? Sometimes they just don't tap into it and they don't hit that realisation point.
Right. Let's take it as fact. We talked earlier before we came on about consensual reality. There's things that we can't argue. They're facts. You know, we can't argue that up is up, down is down. That's a microphone. They're facts. You can say, well, it's my opinion. It's not. You can say that as much as you like, but it ain't going to change the fact that that's a microphone. Okay. I tried a triathlon a couple of years ago. I'm trying it again. I've got another shot at the channel. As part of that, I got all my VO2 max done properly by a guy called Dr. Phil Price. He's senior lecturer of strength and conditioning science at St Mary's University. Wired me up to all the latest equipment.
Yeah.
And my VO2, for those who don't know, VO2 max, it changes a little bit whilst you're training with fitness. So you can increase it a little bit, but not much. And it gives you a good reading of what your natural basic fitness is, you know, what you naturally are. And mine is bang average, okay? So let's park that conversation that I'm physically bang average. I've proven it throughout my life, saying, you know, not getting in the football teams and not being sporty, coming 53rd out of 94, trying to get in the cross country team.
Yeah.
Right? So I am bang average. So that means half the people who are listening to this are physically more capable than me. Just think about that. So that knowledge that you don't know what you're capable of. I said it earlier about all of us have this well of potential that we just don't use. Don't even know it's there. We don't believe it's there.
Yeah.
We don't believe it.
And I want to get on a little bit later once we move into when you started to delve into this a little bit more, into how people can, you know, tap into it a little bit more for themselves. But to take it back to that present moment, and you've passed and you are then officially a Royal Marine, what was life like then before you ended up going on your first tour?
First tour was Ireland in '94. Actually, life was quite hard, so I passed out and I went to K Company, which was 4-2 Commando on the southern slopes of Dartmoor. And I come from Dagenham, which is flat as a pancake, and then all of a sudden I'm going out on morning runs, and it was horrific. I dropped back on my first run, and the troop were going up this huge hill, and they sort of left me behind. I weren't the only one. There was about 3 or 4 stragglers, and they about turned the troop, and they ran back what they'd just run up, and I felt so bad, and I thought, that is never ever going to happen to me again. It did for about 3-4 months, maybe longer, but I went out every night and ran again. So I thought, I don't want that to happen. It's obviously overtraining. And skipping over my first tour, Ireland, there's like when you're in the Marines, they used to say, well, you think this is hard, wait till you get to Norway. It was back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Our biggest threat, you talk about, you know, history repeating itself, our biggest threat was Russia and the Cold War, and the Royal Marines' jobs, the commandos' jobs, were to deny Russia come World War III. Deep water seaports in the Atlantic by defending Norway. So we'd go Norway every 3 years, and you imagine you're not only carrying everything you need to survive in the Arctic, in some months down to, I mean, the coldest I've been was minus 53. Oh, that's in wind chill. Not only you going out and surviving, you've got to fight in that environment. So it was almost a mantra. You think this is cold, wait till you get to Norway. You think this is hard, wait till you get to Norway. And when I finally did go to Norway, I was absolutely petrified of it. And what I found was all the skinny, you know, racing snakes, you call them, Marines, lads who are really fit and can run. 3 days in Norway, that's it, they're done and broken. And I actually started to excel. And I thought, I was actually good in Norway. So I've got a love of Norway. So it kind of changed a little bit then.
Yeah.
You know, how I saw myself, because I was always, you know, I was never going to be the fittest bloke in the troop. And I've always, throughout my career, had to work hard at maintaining what you'd call basic fighting company phys standard. And I've always done that as a matter of principle. Obviously, you know, you have times when you're injured, or, you know, you're carrying an injury or something, and you work on that. But it's always been a matter of pride and principle that I've worked hard at it. You get people, everyone knows someone, if you're into fitness, he doesn't have to train. They go out and run 6-minute miles. I hate them. I'm the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
well, I have to work hard just to maintain
Yeah.
a basic standard of fitness. But I suppose not Ireland, that was hard graft and also enjoyed it. But the thing that changed most, I went Ireland and then I did a Norway, was going to Norway changed because it was, and actually it's what soldiering isn't running round the slopes of Dartmoor, you know, the roads around the lanes around Dartmoor in shorts and trainers. Soldiering is putting a horrific amount of weight on your back and having to operate in horrific heat, in horrible wet sort of conditions, and being able to keep going and going and going and going.
So, not to dive into the first tour, but was there a lot of active?
No, it was the first peace tour.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it was in winter of '94, and the IRA called a truce. But we were expecting it to end any moment. It was the first peace tour, and I was in South Armagh, and if it was going to go, like if the peace was to break, it would have broken in South Armagh. It's the most hard-line area, so I was expecting it to finish at any time. But yeah, no, it was quite enjoyable. I enjoyed my time out there. So also the coldest I've ever felt, not the coldest I've ever been. It's the coldest. I remember going out on patrol. I carried this thing called the Antler, so I was Antler Man. It's a huge bit of ECM, so electronic countermeasures to stop, block radio controlled bombs. And it's like putting a fridge on your back. And in South Armagh, is it boggy and wet? But every 30 metres, you've got a hedge, thick hedge with barbed wire going through it with a ditch the other side. So you're going from A to B. You can't use gates or throw choke points. So obviously, you know, they'll get booby trapped. So you just have to go through this, as you say, it's physically really demanding. But it also meant that I couldn't wear, you know, I just had a t-shirt and a combat jacket because I was working really hard. And this one day it was absolute horizontal rain, absolutely hammered down. So it was drenched to the bone. And as was about a 7-hour patrol we was out. And then as like the day wore on, it turned to sleet and then snow. It was snowing. And then we sat in a hedge and waited for a helicopter to come pick us up. And the clouds just cleared and you had this clear sky and everything just froze. And my combat jacket, it was a windproof, it was just frozen solid. And I couldn't, I had like a what we call warmer's jacket in my Bergen, but I couldn't get it out because if I started unpacking it, the helicopter landed. You know, I'd have been running with everything everywhere. So I just had to sit there and I was shivering. And when we got back, I remember getting in the shower and it just being on lukewarm and it felt like it was burning. So I was like, oh. So that's the coldest I've ever been.
So, you've done Ireland, then you went to Iraq. Was that the next sort of or the first active duty tour that you'd like?
Yeah, I was not again. Circumstances, how things change. I was a corporal then, so I passed my junior command course, and I was in air defence troop. I'd gone air defence. Our job was shooting down planes. It's quite a strange troop because it was full of really old senior Marines, and it was a really hard place to be a corporal in as a junior corporal. So it was like herding cats doesn't quite, herding wasps probably is a better way of, yeah, quite a feral troop. So I learned a distinctive style of leadership there. And then the corporal's job at 40 Commando, where I was drafted afterwards, was in something called the Provi section. So you got the Provost Sergeant, he's in charge of discipline, basically giving out parking tickets on camp.
Yeah.
And you had a couple of corporals in there to kind of help him. And I used to go to work and laugh my head off, working with some brilliant people, and then go home. And we went on a massive deployment called Safe Syria. So we went out to the Oman and a couple of other places. And on the way out, we stopped at Cyprus. And my troop sergeant was a black called Bob Toomey, really, really good guy. Absolutely loved him to bits. And I started getting these texts off me missus. And this is back like when to send a text back when you was abroad would have cost about £72.30. So I couldn't reply to them.
Yeah.
It's like there's been this massive attack and these buildings have fallen down in America. Wow, then they think it's terrorists. You know what I'm talking about now, don't you?
Yeah.
So I went up to Bob and I went, Bob, you know, guess what? I'm getting these texts off from your missus, and he was reading. He went, nah, they'd never be able to pull something like that off. And we went down to there was like this bar on the camp we were in. And it was like this little telly up in the corner. We walked in there and there was about 3 people stood there with their jaws on the floor watching the now famous footage of the attacks on the World Trade Center on 9/11. And it was like Bob came down. It was like, I told you so. It didn't really seem to be an appropriate thing to say. That same day, Charlie Company Sergeant Major was a bloke called Ben Jackson. And he had a wide reputation as being not only a hoofing bloke, but a really, really professional Sergeant Major. And Ben came up to me and he says, he goes, Frank, my nickname in the Marines was Frank. He goes, Frank, have you swapped with, I won't say the bloke's name, so-and-so, so-and-so. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, right, this person, they were going to Charlie Company as a corporal in the fighting, you know, in one of the fighting companies. And he said that he's spoken to you, you're going to swap. He's going to go into Provi and you're coming to Charlie Company. And I said to Ben, I went, I would bite your arm off to get into a fighting company right now. I goes, that didn't happen. I goes, but I will bite your arm off. Okay, I'm a bit annoyed that he's obviously said that. And he went, right, leave it with me. And I said, look, if Bob's okay with it, please, can I come in the Charlie Company? Bob come up to me later that day and went, Frank, do you want to go to Charlie Company? I went, mate, if it's all right with you, yes, please. I went, yeah. And I went, after what we just seen today, and the world changed. And then that's how I ended up as a section commander in Charlie Company when we went into Iraq.
And how did it change everything for your job?
It changed everything for me personally, because up until that point, I believed I was a coward. You know, it was so deep within me. I didn't question it. I just believed. I always thought if I got, you know, if I ever come under contact, I would get PTSD because I'm not as mentally robust as everybody else. I'm a bit a coward and a bit of, you know, a bit of a weakling deep down, and that all goes back
to the childhood.
To the childhood, yeah. To freezing with fear, being petrified of my dad, and your mum crying for you to help and you not being able to because you're too scared. Anyway, we goes out. I was in Charlie Company, section commander, and we go out to the Gulf, and we're going to war. We know we're going. There's a lot of diplomacy, but we end up in Cyprus again, and then we go out to Kuwait. We end up landing in Kuwait, and we're in the desert. And you've got all of the diplomacy and George Bush and Tony Blair and the dodgy dossier and everything, but we didn't see all that. We were cocooned away from that. We was on ship going out. And we landed in the desert. The troop sergeant was a bloke called Craig Rennie, absolute hoofing bloke, was an ML, big monstrous Jordan. And he called the corporals together, and he brought out, and he had these satellite photography. First time I'd seen satellite photography. It was like, of where we were going. And we went, right, here were our objectives. And we flew in. Our objectives were, Charlie Company were to capture the so-called MMS, manifold and metering stations, and so the town, outside the town of L4, on the southern tip of Iraq. And we were going to fly in. There was a helicopter-enabled SEALs and a troop from Bravo, who we never talk about because we were the first ones on the ground. We flew in, Charlie Company flew in on 4 Chinook helicopters, and we landed, and the other section commander, a lad called Steve Chow, he took the first building, probably literally the first building captured in the whole invasion.
Wow.
Because everyone, the whole invasion was waiting for the MMS to be cleared before they crossed their star lines. And then my section moved on to the next building, and we were, I suppose, the short version, but we were like, we had to get in and clear that building, and to do that we had to go around the front, and it was all light and lit up, and we couldn't go there. Then I sort of came around the back of the building. I couldn't see a way in that way either, and I started to panic because I couldn't see a way in. And the troop sergeant, he's on my case. Craig's like, friend, what's happening? Frank, what's happening? And I was like, I didn't know what to do, and I could feel my moment. So at that point, I didn't have the whole of Charlie Company waiting. You know, I had the rest of, you know, almost 250,000 coalition soldiers on my shoulder waiting. And I couldn't see a way in, started to panic, and I could feel my moment slipping through my hands. And the troops, and we was on a corner, and you got your 2 entry men. Their job is to gain entry to the building, and so the rest of the section could clear through. And my 2 entry men, I said to them, right, go. And the lad on the corner called Tony, he shouted about, I can't, they're shooting at me. Now, apparently this got attributed to me. Can't remember saying it, and if I'm honest, doesn't sound like it sounds way too cool for something I would say, but it was attributed to me. Someone heard me say it, and it was like, I shouted back, allegedly, well, fucking shoot him back, dickhead. Sounds far too cool for me, but anyway.
Was there a fear that, you know, you sort of speak about carrying around this sort of coward label to yourself when you then come under contact, or did you just sort of lock in and switch in?
The fear was that my moment was slipping through my hands. I couldn't see a way round. I just couldn't see it. And I talk about this a lot, and you make decisions in 2 parts of your brain. One's the limbic system, which is where your emotions live. It's where you make some conscious decisions, where you basically function. When you're switched off, walking down the road, your limbic system is keeping you walking, keeping you breathing, and making sure you're going the right way and not bumping into things, right? Your prefrontal cortex is where you make your conscious decisions, where you calculate things. Now, your limbic system cannot do the simplest calculation, right? In times of fear and high stress, your limbic system tends to take over. And that's what happened to me. You ever seen stress-induced paralysis where someone just can't make a decision? That's what it is. That's what happened to me. And I always remember back, Troop Sergeant Craig, he jumped over. He started taking over. And I saw him take over. And then there was this moment of clarity, right? When you're doing section attacks in your corporal's course, your junior command course, remember someone said to me, as soon as you come under contact, take a condor moment. That's the term they used. Do nothing. And just think. What that actually does, right, is that shuts the limbic system down and allows the prefrontal cortex to actually start making decisions. Just stop. Because like once you're doing something and you're going and you're going and you're not stopping and
Not
thinking.
processing things, yeah.
So just stop. And I remembered that, and at that precise moment I remember thinking, right, and then I knew what I had to do. It was simple. I remember I went up the Craig and I went, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move Charles section to give cover and fire, move Titch, who was my 2IC, and Titch Cormac actually on the what's his Speed Shop. He was on. He had a television program. Yeah, absolutely brilliant program.
Yeah.
Really, really good guy. He was my 2IC. Moved his fire team to the bottom of the building of Actors Calves, and then I would lead my section round with Peel round. So that's how the longer version of how that actually came about. And I purposely didn't give Craig any chance to question it, because I needed to regain control of the situation. And then I then led my section round the corner. And when I went round, I was expecting to get shot and come back the other way, but I did it anyway. And I didn't have to gear up my confidence or my courage or anything. It was just a matter of fact. It was a matter of fact decision. You couldn't order anyone round the corner into oncoming fire. As a corporal, I had to lead. It was my section. There was no one else there. It was me. It was as simple as that, and I did it. In hindsight, I don't actually think we was under that much fire. I think poor old Tony on the corner there was having a bit of a moment, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And you know, lots of other things happened subsequently and in other tours, and especially in Afghan. But from that point, again, that was a pivotal moment. I didn't know it at the time. It was a pivotal moment because that voice that I just took as normal, it was actual voice that used to say, "You're a coward." I could then say to it, and I did this.
Yeah.
It was an actual conversation in my head. I would say, well, here's my evidence I'm not, because I genuinely thought I was going to get shot.
Yeah, and you did it anyway.
I did it anyway.
Yeah.
So here's my evidence I'm not. Where's your evidence I am?
Yeah.
And that voice got quieter and quieter and disappeared over time.
So obviously there was Iraq, and then there was Afghan, and the multiple tours that you've done. Not to, dive into the details too much of each individual thing. What are, if any, some of the most dangerous moments that you encountered?
Right, between Iraq and Afghanistan, I volunteered for special duties. Not, let me make this absolutely crystal clear, not special forces. I wasn't in the SAS, SBS or Special Reconnaissance Regiment. Okay, get that absolutely clear, because I know there are people who kind of leave that comment out there and let people, I believe that's a lie.
Yeah.
If you knowingly give someone the impression without actually saying, then that's as good as a lie. Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't SF. Special duties, very different.
Yeah.
Which meant I had a very different experience to going to war in Afghanistan. A lot of the time, I had a air-conditioned room. And when I would go on the ground, I often had a QRF within 5 minutes of me, and actually we would go out in covert profile, and that was a lot safer, and you felt a lot safer. So no one gave you a second glance. The Afghans just don't look at you. For me, it felt a lot safer than actually, because I used to go out as well on patrol or fit in with patrols. He was always in a lot more danger.
Was it rare for somebody to be doing both? You say that you kind of volunteered to do it. Was there a lot of you that...
No, there wasn't a lot. Wasn't a lot of us doing that job. I worked in human intelligence. That was my speciality, and the job I was doing out there. It's a very different. As Gucci, to use a military term, as it was, with all your specialist weapons and getting what we used to call hadged up, looking like a getting into profile. You have to acknowledge that the guys and girls on the ground who were in the small PBs and scrapping day to day, they were having an awful time. I went, I spent 6 weeks in Sangin in 2008, and I didn't see a shot fired. I went out patrol every day. It was a really weird. So was it 2007? No, 2008. I think the war. If I looked at the statistics, and it kind of backs this up. Up until 2008, and then after 2008, it was all IEDs, and there was used to stop for the poppy harvest, which is normally about May, I think. Might be wrong, but everything stops. All the Taliban or everyone who's fighting puts down their weapons, picks up a little sickle, and harvests the opium, the teriac. And then after 2-3 weeks, what they used to do is pick the weapons up again and start fighting. But that year, that poppy harvest, they didn't go back to fighting. I think up until that point, I think that the Taliban, I say Taliban, I'm reluctant to call the Taliban as if it was us and them, like, the Allies and the Germans.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that. You're looking at tribes and, different tribal federations are having, it was an absolute mess. You can't think of Afghanistan as the baddies were the Taliban, the goodies were the Afghan government, and we were supporting the goodies.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that, and it's far too complicated. But it felt like they had fought us like they'd fought the Russians, a conscript army, and you can see, the Russians going into Ukraine thinking they'd just roll them over and absolutely getting their asses handed to them. So they're just, corrupt. The equipment isn't well maintained.
Yeah.
The soldiers aren't well trained, and they fought us like they fought the Russians, and they had the Taliban had their arses handed to them. You speak to any soldier who fought out there, and they would talk about the Taliban as being brave to the, point of being stupid. But they got hammered.
Yeah.
And it felt like that year, 2008, that they changed tactic. They realised they couldn't, and then they went to more standoff tactics of lacing the countryside with IEDs and waiting for one to go off and then ambush on the back of an IED, and that was extremely effective.
Yeah.
So that 2008, didn't see a shot fired in the 6 months I was there. So I spent most of it in Lashkar, 6 months in Sangin, and then went back in 2010, where I was based in Kandahar for 2 months or 3 months, just short of 3 months.
Yeah.
And then I went forward to Sangin again on my own, and just so happened that 40 Commando happened to be there when I was there. I wasn't part of 40 Commando.
Yeah.
I was doing my own job there, but I went out on as many patrols. No story, but all of the agents that were being run from Sangin disappeared overnight, and I had to go out and get some more. You can't put an ad in the local paper, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I went out on nearly every patrol I could.
Yeah.
And that was a very, very different experience. That was very, very kinetic.
Was there any experiences where you had any close calls personally?
No, not me personally. No. I've been in contact loads.
Yeah.
But for me, I used to say to the lads, like, after that tour in Sangin, after that first one in Sandon, I used to say to the lads, if I ever went out with them, so I was a colour sergeant, I'd be going out on patrol, but fitting in as a Marine. So I wouldn't be leading the patrol, I'd just be sitting there and I'd have the lads round me. And I used to say to them, lads, honestly, nothing ever happens when I go out on patrol. Promise you, it's going to be the safest patrol ever. And I don't know if I just believed it myself. But and you know, I've been in contact with those rounds coming down around you, but I never thought
It was going to land.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know how stupid that was.
Did obviously there's countless tours? So how many tours of duty did you actually do in total?
Iraq and then 3 tours of Afghan.
So did you find home life coming back difficult to adjust to at any point, or was it quite easy?
Yeah, any military family, when you're coming up to that point, there's a tension in the household. And me and my wife, we got to recognise that. And like, she's been with me since I was 16, so 6 years before I joined the Corps.
Yeah.
With me through training, through Ireland, and then she actually come back from 6 months in Ireland, and she was 3 months pregnant, so work that one out.
Oh.
True story. I had an R&R.
Yeah.
So we've been together, and you recognise that as a family, that tension building up before you go. And I think leading up 2010, especially because the news was just full of bodies coming back through Boyle, Wootton, Bassett, and that was really hard. It was hard for her, it was hard for the kids as well.
How old were your kids at that point? 10?
I can't remember, 7, 8.
Okay, yeah.
Right there, work this out. It was 2010, still the maths. Harriet's 29, so
28. Gotta do a little quick maths test.
yeah, that was 2010. That should be easy to do.
15 years ago
15
now.
years ago, right? So 29.
So about 14.
14.
Yeah.
Was she 14? Right, so Billy would have been about 12.
Yeah.
And
So conscious
oh yeah,
of
yeah.
everything and well aware of what you were
I
going
remember
out
like
to
when
do.
I left for when I left to go in 2010, said goodbye to Billy and Harriet, and Billy and Claire, my wife, and then I was dropping Harriet off friends, and then I was going to drive to back to work, pick up my weapons, and then drive to Bryce Norton. And on the way to pick it up, she was like a bit teary and sobbing, and then as I dropped off her friends, like she was sobbing, and I drove away and I couldn't see through the tears. I actually had to pull over. It's the hardest goodbye I've ever had.
Yeah.
And then 2010 was definitely the most kinetic, and when I came back, I went through a period of about 3 months of just bursting into tears for no reason, not understanding why.
Yeah.
And then it kind of faded. I had a couple of rage moments as well.
Yeah.
Like this just come from nowhere, and you'd be like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I started a fight with some bloke randomly in the road. Yes, and as it was happening, I'm like, part of me brain was thinking, why are you doing this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me what he's done to annoy you again.
Yeah. So you did all this active service and all these tours and all the duty as a Royal Marine and everything else that came with that, and then you have a life-changing accident, perhaps not in the way that people might expect when they hear of a man who spent such a long time in the military. What happened that day?
I was returning to work after Christmas leave. I left about 7 o'clock. I got used to driving through the night and leaving late, so I used to have to go round the M25. So I used to leave till late, get into work, and about midnight on the M3, just before it joins the M25, I come across a car that had crashed into the central reservation. I immediately pulled over, made sure that the people who were out of the vehicle was 2 guys and a very heavily pregnant woman. And another car crashed into that one with such force its gearbox came flying out. Cool. Yeah, so I was hit by an engine and gearbox complete. Took me right leg off and completely dislocated my left leg.
It took it off?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of hanging on by sinew, but I looked at it and went, well, that's gone.
Wow.
But I could see I was bleeding to death.
If you've enjoyed part 1 of the life of Lee Spencer, next week we will hear part 2 of his story, smashing world records, speaking in front of the England national football team, and inspiring each and every one of you to never give up.